And I guess not the only huge sounding part of this song either. His final line, his brain, the thought submissive that inside grows bolder. It uses a trick with some pitch down, distorted, and I think heavily panned vocals underneath to create a noise that I haven't heard often, if at all, in music. I'm sure it's usually reserved for like films to create an evil extraterrestrial or supernatural presence or similar, but it creates a really stunning level of texture.
Yeah, it's those kind of like lower harmonics of the voice kind of shining through, isn't it? Yeah, that build at the end is like this massive kind of crescendo that then just leads to absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Um, a really interesting moment. It just like massive build and then just drops.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a theme on this album is that they'll build you to a point, but they'll never ever really give you that full payoff. And that is nowhere more prevalent than on the final track of the album, I feel. Um, really, really quite unusual to do it so often. You think maybe you do it once in one song and it's a bit of a, whoa, that was a cool thing to do kind of thing, but they seem to do it 4 or 5 times in every song.
Well, I tell you what, with that, why don't we move on to our closer, Ascending Fourth? Brad, you mentioned a term which was glued into my brain at the beginning part of this week, but then completely fell out of it when I was actually doing my notes and my scripting, which was a little bit of a pain. But last week you were talking about something similar, though I think it was a term around like a descending interval of some sort last week. Are ascending fourths a musical term? And I guess the follow-on questions are: does everybody love them, and do Black MIDI use them here, or am I trying to join two dots that don't really exist?
So it's a very obvious kind of two dots that you would think to draw here, and it was something. Obviously, as soon as I heard everyone loves ascending fourths, I was then like, right, where are these ascending fourths in this track? Because I know they're hidden in here somewhere. Um, I've not had a massive amount of time to listen through this track, but from what like I gleaned on the first few listens, there's not a huge like ascending fourth part. So I don't know if that's Black MIDI kind of subverting again your expectations of them. But, like the main chord progression is kind of a jazzy kind of thing. You've got it's known as a 2/5. You expect it to lead to the one, but it never quite does. But you're going between A minor and D, which is a fourth. Then it shifts up a tone to B minor to E minor, which again is a fourth, and that is about as close as I could find. There was nothing really that stood out to me as ascending fourths in the vocal melody or in any of the other harmony other than that kind of main chord progression, which has got two ascending fourths. But yeah, I was definitely listening out for them, but didn't really quite find anything that satisfied my curiosity as to what they were actually going on about. Yeah.
Well, you got further than I did, at least, where I just went, is that a music thing? Sounds like it's probably a music thing. Ah, Brad will know.
I actually, because I couldn't hear the ascending fourths at all. Um, and I kind of thought maybe that it was a pun or a play on words. In terms of, again, I didn't look at the lyrics, so I can't actually speak to this in that much depth. But I thought maybe it was something to do with ascending fourth, as in going forward, rather than ascending fourths musically. Because it again, I can't pick out music like Brad can, but I couldn't. It didn't feel like that to me when I was listening through. I think there's maybe a bit of disguise on some of the guitar chord progression that kind of almost fool you into thinking there is some. Um, but again, I couldn't really hear any. Yeah, I enjoyed the song actually a lot more than I enjoyed a lot of the rest of this album. The guitar having the space that it did, and it was really pretty. Sorry, my cat is attacking my wire. Yeah, it was really, really nice, and it worked quite well with the vocals. And the verse 2 build is sudden, but it's really nice. Again, really tense, and then as soon as it starts, it's over, back to calm kind of thing. Which is what I was sort of saying about these builds, and they never really let you get to the point you think you're going to get to. They're back to what they want to do. So it was kind of on the edge there. The thing I thought was most interesting about this song was actually the structure of it, because it's chorus and then it's 5, maybe 6 or 7 verses bookended by another chorus. And it's just a really unusual way to write a song. And it's more obvious here than it is at other points of the album. Yeah, it was really, really cool, nice little bookend kind of thing. Felt like a kind of story thing was going on, which is maybe why I thought there was a kind of pun or play on words happening.
So it's worth mentioning that the title of the song is spelled Ascending Forth, Forth. I would assume, again, because I'm still playing about with some of this stuff, that a fourth or, ascending fourths would be Fourths. So I
Yes,
think there's an element of that,
fourth
but
chord.
because the title was Ascending Forth, you think that, it's about ascending forth, as you say. But then the lyrics were making reference to that. Generally, I think though, the lyrics on this album do remain impenetrable to the end. To stand up tall and straight is to break one leg. Since last third quarter, he has not got out of bed. Am I missing something here? Like, that's just generally a collection of words. And I've hammed it up a little intentionally just to bring that through, but it's not far off. One line I did pull out was masterpiece of schmaltz, which I think, if you're being unkind and stretching a bit, you could describe this song as. It makes sense to me that we have a nearly 10-minute long journey to close out this song on an album that has been markedly theatrical from beginning to end. But coming to this album and having not heard the singles, I think you could have played me this song separately to this, and I never would have identified it as a Black Midi song. In the context of Cavalcade, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. It's sprawling, it's indulgent, it's got a touch of schmaltz to it. And, maybe doesn't sound far off a masterpiece as of a closer for this album, at least. I think it's really interesting, though. This is one of the only tracks on the album where you drop a lot of those wild rhythms and tempos that we've had on everything coming up. It plays it relatively straight, doesn't it?
I thought so, yeah. I mean, I'm sure if when Brad gets back, he'll be able to tell you something different that we couldn't hear, because this band is always doing things and hiding them as well at the same time. It's not always as in your face as you think, kind of thing. The only thing I felt kind of let down about this song is that it promises so much. It builds over and over and over again, and then lets you back down, like you're letting the air out of a balloon or something. And kind of by the 7-minute mark, I'm losing hope that it's ever gonna really crescendo in any way, or it's gonna have that moment. It does eventually build, and it comes around the 9-minute mark. But it just doesn't feel as good as it should after that much kind of build. So that was a little disappointing for me. I was hoping for one last like huge moment, but it never really comes.
Yeah, I think the outro to this is kind of playing on a lot of, again, like going back to like jazz standard stuff, big band stuff. Like, it's obviously this massive build. It's just repeating kind of the last 4 or 8 bars, I think it is. He's definitely sounding like he's crooning here. It's definitely got that Frank Sinatra, for a lack of a better word, vibe. It is a typical build, but it's kind of dragged out to the point where it's like beyond that. Um, I think you're right about the big crescendo finish, but overall, I'm not sure it's not just maybe 2 minutes too late kind of thing. I don't know. I always look at the last song of an album and see like a 9 minute song, and I think, this have been two different songs, you know. Um, Again, I think there's a lot of stuff to like here, like sonically going on. You've got like a really nice acoustic guitar sound, some lovely harmonies. There's a really great kind of pushing run up that goes on from like E to F to G sharp. Especially you get some piano arpeggios coming through on it as well in like later repetitions. Yeah, the moment that I think that stuck out for me the most was that crooning outro. Like I said, I'm not sure it wasn't maybe just a minute or two too long.
I loved it. I absolutely loved the vocals cutting loose completely at the end of the track and just getting into all of that crooning. Again, surprise, surprise. Vocalist over here loves it. Him taking center stage at the end. That full crescendo at the end is done really interestingly, I think, for me, because it all builds and builds and builds and builds, and then you actually get like quite a sudden stop, all of a sudden, which you think, okay, maybe this is the end, but then it allows the orchestra to then flourish and take their bow. It's interesting, a fitting end, I think, to a wild, wild album. I have the same reaction as you, Brad, where I see a 9 minute closer to an album. It's not done as much these days, but I always figure it's going to end after 4 minutes, and then there's going to be like 3 minutes of silence and then a hidden track just for the last minute or so, like back in the good old CD days or whatever. But yeah, no, I again, love the crooning overindulgent vocals. More overindulgent vocals.
Are you hoping for All By Myself?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
This gave
Yeah, I didn't even. Sorry, Rocco.
this gave you more My Way vibes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with that big finish. It was definitely, Sinatra-esque. No denying that. But it still felt quite different. It felt a little more sinister than something that those guys maybe would have been doing. Which is probably where it stands out. But I'm with you, Brad. That it finish came 2 minutes too late for me.
It's because you're, instead of listening to Frank Sinatra, all cleanly dressed, white suit next to a piano or whatever, you're actually just listening to Tommy Wiseau. I'm going to try and make that image happen. But hey, we're a little bit pressed for time, so I'm not going to go on about it too long here. Let's move up onto our sum up discussion. And Cam, why don't you kick us off this week?
Quite disappointed. I can't lie. I said it to you both before. Don't really enjoy this album, and it's such a shame because I loved Schlagenheim so much. I like the fact that these are three young guys just doing exactly the music they want to make, no compromises, and doing it well and getting recognized for the ability that they have. I just don't think this had good enough songs for me to want to ever go back to it. It felt like quite a chore to listen to it sometimes. I said something to you in the week, Matt, is when you've finished a degree, like when you've got your degree, you don't want to read literature anymore. You don't want to read books afterwards because you spent this whole time reading. And this kind of what this felt like to me. It felt like reading an academic textbook as opposed to reading like a literature book or something like that, in musical form. So it never really had good enough moments for me to kind of have that instant accessibility to want to deep dive later on. It had some, but it didn't have enough of them. So it won't be going into my regular rotation. It won't be replacing Schlagenheim. I'm not even sure I'm going to buy the record.
Oof. Big oof. Brad, how about you?
I did enjoy it. I mentioned to you earlier that I've had kind of an awful week, and I feel like you do really have to kind of devote some attention to this album. In some ways, it's definitely not an easy listen. I've not massively heard Schlagenheim. I think I probably listened to it when you sent it to me originally, Cam, and not listened to it since. So I can appreciate that it could be a departure from that. Accessible, again, another word you mentioned, I don't really think applies here. Um, I think there's a lot to love. I think there's like great moments of builds. There's great dynamics in this again. Really good builds, really good kind of dips. I think this is the kind of album I'd listen to if I needed some inspiration. you know, if I, like I said earlier, if I needed a drum part, and I was like, I don't want to write the same shit. This is the kind of album I would then go back to and listen to specifically for those kind of purposes. There's some like amazingly creative stuff, amazingly technically talented stuff. I think you need a platform of like a more accessible first album to kind of launch this kind of album from. I think if they'd come out of the gates with this straight away, don't think they would have reached the kind of heights that they have. Because, like I said, it's not particularly accessible. I don't feel there's a lot that appeals to me in this with the jazz harmony, the callbacks to Big Bang Swing, callbacks to Bossa Nova and stuff like that. Whether it still falls into my regular rotation, I'm not sure, because I did feel like some of it was hard to listen to. Again, I mentioned it to you guys earlier, but it does take some concentration. It's not something you can have on the background. It demands your listening. It demands your attention if you want to get anything from it. If you don't give it that, it's not going to give you anything back. For the most part, if you try and let it wash over you, you're going to get nowhere with it. So it's a difficult album. Like I said, I think it's a great second album. I think it's a really great second album. I could see how it would be very polarizing with fans of the first album, because of that lack of accessibility. But I kind of enjoyed it. Like I said, it's difficult to listen to, but I will keep coming back to it when I need some inspiration, because I think it is really inspirational. There's lots of great stuff going on.
You've made a really interesting point there, I think, Brad, and something that I didn't get a chance to mention too much throughout the discussion tonight that I definitely wanted to hit on. For me, I think this was a very volume sensitive type album, right? As you've alluded to, we obviously listen to these albums that we're discussing on multiple occasions throughout the week, and that tends to mean intentionally or otherwise I catch them in different settings at different levels of focus. So, and even different pieces of equipment. One listen might be particularly focused with my headphones on. Another might be me putting the album on in the background while listening to it on a speaker while I'm working. I did notice that this week, more than others, the method of listening really impacts what you can hear when you're switching between headphones and a speaker in particular. And it makes sense, I think, considering how much is going on. Albums all over the place, but it's quite clearly by design. We knew that would be the case coming in. I've done it at points tonight, but the more I think about it, the more unfair I think it is to compare it directly to Schlagenheim, aside from these are two albums from one band. They clearly set out to make a different album this time around, and that's probably a good thing. I expect Black Midi could have written another Schlagenheim in their sleep, that Artsy Folk and Six Music listeners and others would have applauded. They would have won a bunch of awards, but I sincerely doubt that this is what this band is about. They've made a distinct piece of art, And as I often realize when I walk into a gallery, I am woefully underqualified when it comes to understanding and interpreting art. I've said this before. I'm sure I'll say it again in the future. A week isn't enough time to get to the core of what this album is and, what this album is going to do. It's probably a bit too unfocused for my own personal taste for me to go back to it time and time again and start divining that meaning. And therefore, I don't think it would make my personal rotation. But I think for those that do, it probably won't disappoint. I think either way, I'm still happy that I got to go along this journey, particularly because it was so theatrical in places. And I'm sure I'll buy tickets again the next time the Black Midi Circus rolls into town.
Oh yeah, 100%. This has not put me off seeing them live. I would love to go see this band live just to watch the drummer perform. I think more than anything else, because I think that would be, pretty something special. I don't disagree with anything you said, honestly. I think I probably made the mistake of expecting Schlagenheim to, when that was clearly never going to happen in retrospect, because of who this band is. Yeah, difficult one. Maybe this is an album that will grow on repeated listens. And maybe I'll come back to it in another setting, or just a song from it will come on, or I'll put track 6, which the name of I've forgotten already,
Dethroned.
on, and it'll grow. But yeah, I'm Dethroned. Yeah, Dethroned. That's the one. And maybe it will sink in that way, because you're right. A week is not enough. I mean, I could spend many a musical lesson with Brad or with another music teacher unpacking just one of the songs from this album, and you'd still never learn everything that was happening in it. You'd still never understand all the theory, all the technique and stuff like that. So a week is never going to be enough time to make a fully informed decision. But that's what we've got. Actually, we didn't have just a week, we had 9 days, so maybe that's something.
It's a good point. 9 days.
Well, we only picked it on Friday, so we didn't actually know we were going to be doing it. So we did only have a week, really. Yeah, there is so much to unpick in this. If you really want to dive down into the nitty gritty of it, I get the feeling that these guys don't think that way. It's so effortless and it's so natural to them. It's not they've thought about every beat and every fucking harmony they've played. It's what sounds good to them based on what they've listened to and the stuff they're into. It never feels like it's forced into being technical, even though a lot of it is outside of the kind of pop harmony that we're so used to hearing. Yeah, like,
I think
It's surely got to be a degree of like muscle memory, though, hasn't it? Because as much as you're saying this is just what sounds good to them, etc., they've not really thought about it, they've not had to think about it. There must be a degree of, because they're so familiar with it, because they know the theory, because this is the way they play, that just seeps in quite naturally, in a way that if I wanted to write something like this, I'd have to sit down, think it, and plan it out, kind of thing. So maybe they didn't have to sit down and plan it out, but I think because it's so precise, then there must be some element of that.
the famous quote, and I'm not sure. I definitely don't know who it's from. I'm not sure if anyone really knows who it's from, but the famous thing you hear is, yes, you go and you learn all that theory, but eventually you get to a point where you forget that and you just play. And it is clear that these guys have put in the time to learn the theory, but I think at this point they have kind of, not that they've forgotten it, but they're not consciously thinking about it when they're writing. It's so ingrained, from the music they listen to and from stuff they've written before. It's so ingrained that they don't have to think about it that way. If you kind of get what I mean, because it feels so natural and so effortless.
There are so few moments where I can draw an American football comparison to some of the music that we're talking about. But, when you're playing American football, it's quite a mental game. And you often say that the point where you stop thinking about playing American football is the point where you become a football player, right? It's the exact same thing there. And, you know, I get the sense the level that these guys are operating on across 2 albums, they're probably, as you say, not actively thinking about the theory. They're just playing at this point. But yeah, you know, hey, we've all had these albums where we've gone, a week isn't enough with this. So, you know, with any luck, we'll all get the chance to go back and listen to some of these as we go forward. And who knows, there may even be a piece of content in that yet. We'll find out. But I think for now, we should probably leave Cavalcade behind and start looking ahead to next week. And I started to notice that there's a number of albums over the coming weeks that I'm genuinely quite excited about. Looks like we're coming up to a real boon period and some tough decisions to make over the next few months. But what are we thinking about for next week?
I think there's 4 contenders for next week. It's a really difficult. I'm gonna leave it up to you guys to pick between you, because there's the Japanese Breakfast album. The last one, Soft Sounds from Another Planet, was just absolutely phenomenal album. So that, you know, the new one, Jubilee, is bound to be good. Although actually, having just been through tonight, maybe it won't be. You know, the last one was good, so we'll go with that. There's the new Wolf Alice album. Can't lie, haven't been too excited by the singles, but do really love that band and their previous work. Lloyd Banks released an album today. I don't know if you're overly familiar with him, but he, someone will correct me in chat if I'm wrong, but was a former G Unit member. Is kind of having a bit of a renaissance with this new kind of hip hop
as soon as you
movement that's
said,
going along.
as soon as we were talking about albums released next week, Dreadlocks chimed in. Lloyd Banks of G Unit fame dropped a very good album today.
There you go. Yeah, so it'll be quite an interesting one, because obviously a veteran of the scene, did some not to my taste music with G Unit in the past, but is now doing kind of more stuff with the likes of Rock Marciano, Benny the Butcher, kind of, you know, that kind of style. And then there's another hip hop album by a guy called Peter Rosenberg, who I'm not familiar with, but there's a lot of hype behind, so that might be exciting. So that's the 4. What do you want to do?
Well, when I was looking at the list, was drawn to the Wolf Alice album just simply because that's a band that I know of. That's a band that I've heard a couple of songs from in the past, but I don't think I've ever sat down and listened to a full Wolf Alice album. But you know, I guess we've gone very guitar driven over the last few weeks. It's been a little while since we picked up a hip hop album. That might be a nice change of pace. Brad, where are you falling down?
Yeah, I'm not really ready to be disappointed by a Wolf Alice album. I don't think I'm gonna handle that. So I think this former G Unit number album sounds like a good shout to me.
Fantastic. So I think Lloyd Banks is the way that we are going down. Dreadlocks, thank you for letting us know. Rosenberg is a radio DJ, and it's a dope com piece put together with various rappers and producers. Hot 97 DJ, one of the biggest hip hop stations in America, apparently. But should we stick with the Lloyd Banks?
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the Lloyd Banks one, because, like I said, his previous work is very sort of G Unit kind of driven. Everyone knows 50 Cent, obviously. That's not the kind of hip hop I'm really into. I never really vibed with it. I don't think it was made for me, so I don't think that's a huge problem. But the people that he's working with now interests me a lot. The likes of, like I said, Rock Marciano, Benny the Butcher, etc. So I'd be quite keen to hear if there's a style change, if there's, you know, what's happening with a must be 40 something Lloyd Banks these days. So yeah, that sounds good to me.
Brilliant. I will play a lot of Blood on the Sand in preparation for next week. But hey, for now, I think we are at wrap-up time. If you are with us live here on Twitch, stick around after we say goodbye for some post-stream fun. And if you've missed any of this discussion or want to hear it again, we will have a recorded version of this going up on our YouTube channel on Sunday. If you are watching that recorded version, then we'll be going live again next Friday at 8 p.m. GMT with another album review. And shout out once again to Millie Draws a Lot on Instagram, spelled with a Y, for all of our wonderful graphics. If you want more Black MIDI, head over to their website, bmblackmidi.com. And if you want more Ballpark music, then you can follow us here on Twitch, subscribe to us, hit the bell on YouTube. And check out our link tree. That's at /BallparkMusicUK, where you can find all of our socials. Cam, did you enjoy it tonight?
Very much so. Thought it was a good discussion, and yeah, a band I really like, although I didn't enjoy this album as much.
And Brad, did you enjoy your first concerted dose of Black MIDI?
No, I hate doing this, man. I hate talking to you guys. It's never fun.
That's where I am every week, every single week. No, I have had a lot of fun. As always, we will see you all next time. Stay safe.